Preface: The Last Voice of Assyria. In the dust and heat of ancient Nineveh, beneath the watchful eyes of stone-winged Lamassu, the Assyrian Empire carved its name into history with the edge of iron and the rhythm of march. It was a world where fire and metal shaped the very fabric of life, where soldiers became architects of fear, and roads paved in conquest connected the empire in its unrelenting pursuit of power. This was the world of Ashur-bel-Nasir, a man forged by the fires of battle, whose hands once gripped the hilt of an iron sword, now turned to the quiet task of preserving the stories of an empire that has long since crumbled into dust. Through his eyes, we glimpse the life of a soldier, a conqueror, and a storyteller. His memories are etched not just in the annals of victory but also in the moments of stillness that followed, the silence after the screams, the weight of regret that comes with the passing of time. This is a journey not just of iron and fire, but of reflection and remembrance. As the old soldier looks back on his life, he understands that while empires rise and fall, it is the stories we leave behind that endure. His voice, though quiet, still carries the weight of an era, a time when the power of the gods was reflected in the blade of a sword and the wheels of chariots. Through his words, we are transported to a time when the world was shaped by war, but also by the quiet moments in between. The Last Voice of Assyria is a meditation on memory, empire, and the price of power. In this tale, we are not just given a chronicle of battles won and cities conquered, but a poignant reflection on what it means to live and to remember. The Last Voice of Assyria, an Iron Age Journey. Chapter 1, The Anvil of Ashur. The heat of Nineveh clung to the skin like a second tunic, dusty, dry, and laced with the scent of bronze oil and iron filings. Even now, after so many seasons of peace, my hands still twitch at the familiar clatter of hammer striking metal, a rhythm that shaped my youth and hardened my bones. I am Ashur-bel-Nasir, once a soldier of the mighty empire, now a memory carrier, a whisperer of what was. My name is long forgotten by the young ones who run through the market stalls, but within the silence of my chamber, I still hear the chants of the legions and the scream of chariots splitting wind. I was born beneath the shadow of ramparts taller than trees, where Lamassu, stone-winged beasts, stood guard at the city gates, eternal and unblinking. The priests said they kept watch for spirits, but to me, they were reminders of what we were forged to do: conquer, dominate, endure. In my first season of manhood, I was given my iron sword, heavier and truer than the brittle bronze my father once sharpened. It glinted black in the sun, a gift of the earth shaped by fire and sweat. That was the year I became part of the wall of spears. We marched on a road so straight it seemed drawn by the gods themselves. The king's road stretched from the Zagros to the sea, a web of stone threading together 1,000 cities under Ashur's name. I remember the way the sandals of 1,000 soldiers slapped in unison, the soft murmur of discipline trailing behind our footsteps. Roads meant swiftness, and swiftness meant power. We descended like a storm upon lands that dared defy our rule, swift, ruthless, and unrelenting. The first time I saw battle, my breath caught in my throat like a caged bird. We stood atop a ridge as the sun bled over the horizon, dyeing the plain in shades of gold and fire. Below, the enemy gathered, banners flickering like dying stars. The iron in my hand grew warm with my fear, but the drumbeat from the rear, low and deep, calmed my spirit. War is a language, and in Assyria, we were fluent from the cradle. We crushed the resistance with a precision carved into us through discipline and pain. Our iron-tipped arrows sang through the air, our siege towers rolled with a groan like beasts awakened, and when the walls fell, we poured in like a river freed from its banks. Victory, yes, but it was never clean. Blood mixed with dust, screams hung heavy in the air, and fire curled around the broken timbers of homes. I did not speak of it for many years, not even to my brothers in arms, but we believed in the order we brought, the strength we lent to weak bones. When we returned to Nineveh, the king paraded us through the avenues. The people threw garlands and palm fronds, and our iron helms gleamed beneath the sun. The scribes etched our names into stone and clay, committing our victories to memory. And in that moment, I felt immortal. Now, in the twilight of my years, I feel the weight of that immortality. The iron sword rests above my hearth, dulled by time, yet still whole. The roads I once marched are now dusted with silence, and the Lamassu at the gate bear the stains of wind and age. But within me, the fire still smolders. I have come to believe that it is not only blood that nourishes empire, but memory, carried in the bones of old soldiers, in the ink of careful scribes, and in the heat of forge and fire. My hands, though unsteady now, still recall the grip of the hilt, the tension before a strike. These hands once helped carve an empire of stone and iron. Now, they shape words in clay. And so I speak, not with sword, but with story. I whisper to the winds of Assyria, hoping they will carry my voice beyond the crumbling walls. For I was there. I saw the rise, felt the iron, heard the screams, and walked the roads of kings. And I remember. Chapter 2, Roads of Fire and Iron. I remember the scent of hot iron better than I remember my mother's face. In the workshops that lined the outer edge of Nineveh, the forges roared like desert winds, hungry and loud, and the smiths moved with a rhythm older than speech. There, in the glow of the fire, we learned that conquest was not won with flesh alone, but with the edge of iron shaped by steady hands and endless heat. We called our blades teeth of the gods. They were darker than night and sharp enough to whisper through leather and bone. The bronze of our fathers had grown tired, bent too easily, dulled too soon. But iron was a different thing altogether. It held the wrath of Ashur in its weight. And we, his servants, his soldiers, carried it like sacred flame. I trained with the new weapons long before I tasted their use in battle. At first, the iron resisted our shaping, brittle or soft if mistreated. But the smiths learned, as did we. They folded and quenched, treated and reforged. And when they were done, they handed us not just weapons, but symbols of an age. Our empire was not born in stone alone, but in these blades, in the wheels of chariots rimmed with iron, in the nails that bound timber to timber in siege towers and battering rams. The king, may his name live forever, knew that iron and roads would make us eternal. His engineers carved paths into the earth with stone, laid wide enough for 6 soldiers abreast. From Nineveh to Calhu, from Arbela to the shores of the western sea, our roads stretched like fingers seeking tribute. On these roads we marched, swift and tireless, as if born of the wind itself. We brought with us not only weapons but a message: resistance would not be tolerated. I remember marching to the mountains beyond Urartu. The air there was sharp and thin, laced with the scent of pine and snow. The people thought their walls would save them, their gods shield them. But we brought iron to their gates, fire to their fields, and fear to their dreams. The roads allowed us to come fast, with chariots rolling like thunder and soldiers like grains of sand blown on the wind. There was no time for them to pray. In those days, I began to understand that we were not only warriors, we were architects of submission. Our empire built itself upon fear as much as stone, and iron was the mouth through which fear spoke. We showed the conquered not just that we were stronger, but that we were everywhere. Our roads reached them before their hope could. Our iron found them before their courage awoke. Even in peace, the roads pulsed with life. Messengers rode day and night, their breath rising in clouds as they carried the king's words farther than the eye could imagine. Merchants followed in our wake, trading spices, wool, and grain along the same veins where armies once marched. What we had built in conquest now sustained the empire. And still, beneath the sound of sandals and wheels, the iron whispered, "Always, always," it whispered. And in the deep quiet of night, when I lay with the sky above and the road beneath, I would rest my hand on the packed stone and feel the warmth still clinging to it from the day's sun. It felt like a heartbeat. As if the empire itself was alive, its breath drawn in every step we took, its pulse measured in the rhythm of marching feet. We believed that Ashur had granted us the world, not just to rule, but to shape. With iron in our hands and stone beneath our souls, we believed we could reshape even time itself. Chapter 3, The Silence Between Screams. There are parts of war that no sword can carve away, memories that cling to the ribs like thorns. They come to me now, when the lamps are low and the sky turns red at dusk, as if the heavens themselves remember. And in that quiet, the screams return, not as sound, but as sensation. A tightening in the chest. A shiver in the spine. The way silence swells just before a man begins to beg. We, the soldiers of Assyria, were not merely fighters. We were instruments of awe. Ashur did not conquer by might alone, but by fear, calculated, deliberate, and refined as the edge of a blade. I was taught early that terror was a weapon. I learned to wield it with precision. It began with the rituals of punishment. When we captured a city, our orders were clear: leave a mark. Not always on walls or temples, but on minds. We flayed the leaders, their skin tacked to gates like banners, fluttering in the desert wind. We impaled the defiant, raising them high so all who passed might feel their gaze even after death. We burned villages in perfect silence, letting only the crackle of fire speak. Not out of madness. Not out of cruelty. But out of strategy. Fear made us immortal. I was young when I first took part in such acts. My hands trembled as I bound the limbs of a rebel chief. His eyes locked onto mine, not in hatred, but in pleading. He spoke of daughters, of orchards in bloom, of songs sung by riverbanks. But I had been trained to harden myself. The officer gave the signal. My blade followed. It was never easy. And perhaps that is what frightened me most, that it became easier over time. We believed that by sowing terror, we prevented rebellion. And often, it worked. Cities opened their gates before our siege towers arrived. Rulers prostrated themselves and sent tribute without a single arrow fired. Our fame preceded us, our cruelty carried on the wind like a curse. To the world, we were the storm. Unstoppable. Divine. Yet within me, a small crack formed. I began to watch the eyes of those we spared, and those we did not. I noticed how the silence after a massacre was thicker than the wails that came before. How children watched us with faces too still for their age. How sometimes, even the wind grew quiet in places we had passed. The priests said we were the hand of Ashur, purging the world of chaos and sin. But I began to wonder, what kind of God demands such silence? Years passed. My name rose through the ranks. I was made captain, then commander. I led campaigns through the Zagros hills and across the Euphrates. My deeds were etched into clay, scribes praised my loyalty, my ferocity. But I no longer felt pride when I walked through the gates of conquered cities. I felt tired, as though each act of terror took something from me that would not grow back. Once, in a village near Haran, we captured a scholar, an old man with ink-stained fingers. He had written poems of defiance, hidden in clay jars buried beneath olive trees. They brought him to me, accused and trembling. He knew the punishment. I should have made an example. But instead, I sent him away with a warning. My men did not understand, and I did not explain. That night, I dreamed of rivers running red and voices crying out in languages I had never heard. When I awoke, I understood, the fear we used so effectively would one day turn inward. Empires that rise on terror must always look over their shoulder. Now, as my bones grow brittle and my voice fades, I feel those old ghosts drawing near. They do not accuse, they simply watch. I see them in the corners of my room, in the flicker of the oil lamp, in the hush that follows my breath. I speak to them sometimes, not for forgiveness, but for remembrance. For if they are remembered, perhaps they are not lost. The scribes still write of our victories. They craft great tales of might, of dominion, of glory carved in flesh and fire. But I wish they would also write of the stillness that followed, the hush after horror, the quiet before the next conquest. That silence held more truth than any chant of triumph. I sit now beside the stone path that once led warriors like me to distant cities. It is cracked and overgrown, forgotten by those who never marched it. But I remember. I remember everything. And in that memory, I try to find peace, not in what I was ordered to do, but in the moments I chose otherwise. Small moments. Quiet mercies. I hope they mattered. Even now, when I walk the ancient roads near the city's edge, I can feel the heartbeat of the empire in every stone. Some are cracked, others buried by dust and weeds, but if you press your hand to them, they are still warm with the footsteps of our march. I am old, yes. My stride is halting, my back bent like a bow. But I have begun to see what the young do not, that technology, though forged in heat and wielded in war, is also memory. The iron we used to strike down walls now supports gates and bridges. The roads we carved for conquest now carry the laughter of children, the weight of grain, the tread of merchants with skin the color of distant suns. And yet, I wonder, was it all worth it? There are nights when I wake with the taste of smoke in my mouth and the clang of weapons in my ears. I think of the roads we built, the tools we forged, and the lives that paid for them. In our pride, we said we were building forever. But even iron rusts, and even the strongest roads crumble. Still, I take comfort in one thing. That which is written survives. The scribes have etched our victories, our sorrows, and our knowledge onto clay tablets, stored in cool chambers beneath the ziggurats. Long after our bones turn to dust and our roads are overgrown, someone will read those marks. They will know of Ashur, of the blades we bore, of the iron we shaped and the blood it spilled. And maybe, just maybe, they will remember me. Not as a killer. Not even as a hero. but as one who walked the road, who felt its fire beneath his feet, and who spoke, at last, of what it meant to carry iron in a world of clay. Chapter 4: Clay Beneath My Fingertips. The scent of dried reeds and ink greets me now more often than the smell of steel or blood. My joints are stiff, my back crooked, but my fingers still know the shape of cuneiform, the way a reed stylus presses into soft clay like the imprint of memory itself. I have traded my iron blade for tablets, and the weight is different, lighter in the hand, heavier in the soul. I sit among the scribes in the outer chambers of the temple library, beneath vaulted ceilings painted with stars. Here, the air is thick with silence and dust, but not the kind born of death. This is a gentler stillness, the kind that surrounds thought, learning, and remembrance. The kind that gathers like smoke around wisdom passed from hand to hand. Assyria has always prized the written word. Even in the days when we were most bloodthirsty, we were also careful historians. Our kings understood that what is written becomes truth, that stone and clay endure long after the tongue grows still. Our battles were carved into palace walls, our victories immortalized in bas-relief, our laws impressed upon tablets buried beneath the ziggurats. And now, in this quiet end of my days, I too have become a writer of memory. It is a strange thing to write of oneself. On campaign, we saw ourselves only through the eyes of command, tools, weapons, parts of a larger machine. Now, as my stylus carves slow strokes into clay, I find pieces of myself I didn't know had survived. I remember the tremble of my first march, the glint of iron in the dawn, the ash on a child's cheek after a siege. These memories once seemed like burdens, but now they are stories, frail lights I offer to the future. The others here do not know my name. They call me the old soldier. They offer me tea with dates, ask for tales of distant cities, and chuckle when I correct their geography. They think me soft in the head, perhaps. Let them. I am no longer interested in how I am seen. Only in what I leave behind. I have written of the campaigns, yes, but not as the kings would want. I have not masked our cruelty and grandeur, nor wrapped our terror in the cloth of glory. I have written of the nights after conquest, when we sat in silence and did not toast the fallen. I have written of the engineer who wept when his siege tower crushed a temple. I have written of the soldier who carried a wounded child 3 days to safety before returning to battle. These stories are not carved in alabaster or shouted in victory parades. But they are true. And that, I believe, is worth something. In the deepest chamber of the library, where the light barely reaches, the royal tablets are kept. Shelves upon shelves of kings' proclamations, victories, tributes, threats etched in neat rows. I walked there once, years ago, when my hand was still steady. I touched the tablet that bore my name, chiseled beneath the recounting of a siege in Elam. It read, Ashur bel Nasir, commander of the western flank. No mention of fear. No mention of fire. Just a name and a position. I remember smiling then. Not out of pride, but out of understanding. That was all history truly records, a name, a place, a moment. The soul of the thing lives elsewhere. It lives in how we are remembered in the quiet places. In the words whispered by old men. In the sigh of the wind over abandoned roads. I wonder who will read my tablets. Perhaps no one. Perhaps they will be buried in an earthquake, shattered, forgotten. Or perhaps, long after Nineveh crumbles and the iron rusts into dust, a traveler will find them. A scholar, maybe. Or a dreamer. They will read the marks I pressed with trembling fingers, and they will know, someone lived, and remembered, and cared enough to write it down. That is all I can offer now. Outside, the sun warms the steps of the temple. The roads are quieter these days, but still there. Merchants walk them. Priests. Children. The empire is fading, yes, I see that now. Even the strongest stones wear down. Even kings are forgotten. But the stories, they might last. I take up my stylus again. The clay is cool beneath my touch. My hands move slowly, but they move. One last line. One last breath impressed into earth. I was Ashur bel Nasir. Soldier of Assyria. Witness to fire and silence. And I remember.